Hey, small business people and lovers of good stories in general. Welcome to episode 13 of Small Business War Stories. And this is a great one. This is Matt Vroom, the founder of Henge Docks. They make Mac docking stations, and they got in a nasty intellectual property lawsuit early on in their company. And it was really interesting to hear from Matthew how he dealt with the threat of his company basically going under because somebody sued him because of a patent. And then how he has basically survived and thrived and how he navigated that. This is the first time that Matthew is telling his full story in public, and I am flattered and honored that he has decided to do it here at Small Business War Stories. Small Business War Stories is brought to you by Proven. Proven is a small business hiring tool. We have over 100 different job boards where your job can get distributed to, and then thousands of businesses use this nationwide. Try it out, proven.com. There's no contracts. It's a free trial. And keep an eye out. We're only 2 weeks away from the first episode of the Soul of America tour, where we get some amazing stories from people all over the U.S. For now, enjoy episode 13 with Matthew Vroom of Henge Docks. Small Business War Stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes. And we are live here in Austin, Texas. And I'm sitting down here with Matthew Vroom today. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Thanks for having me on. It's awesome down here in Austin.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here during the middle of South by Southwest, and you've had an eventful last 24 hours here. From maybe tell us a little bit. You got here, and then you got your badge stolen, and then you've had a very eventful and jarring last little bit, right, of time.
Well, I figure after a decade of coming down here, I was probably due for a little bit of drama. But I managed to get my badge pickpocketed out of my pocket last night. But
Jesus. Just
like they tell you got to wear it around your neck, or and then they don't pay for it or don't allow you to get replacements. Wow. So that'll be fun.
Well, hopefully things start going better from now on. And thank you so much for coming and sit down with us and sharing some of your stories.
No problem. It's a great distraction from that drama. So
Awesome.
And I love the podcast too. So the first few episodes I listened to have been awesome. So it's an honor to be featured.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're putting quite a bit of effort into it. So it's always great to hear, especially people that have been in the trenches for a while, appreciate the podcast. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So you run a company. You founded the company called Henge Docks.
Yep.
And maybe tell us a little bit of what does Henge Docks do?
So we are the leading supplier of docking stations for Apple notebook computers. So basically what a docking station does, at least in the PC world, is as you move from your mobile on the go to your desktop with your multiple monitor setup, you can just drop your computer in and it forms all the connections.
Yeah.
In the PC world, that's relatively simple because most PCs feature kind of a serial port on the bottom.
Yeah.
And Macs use a lot of proprietary connection and also all of their own individual connections on the side. So there aren't a lot of options available out there. But we've been able, over the last 7 years, we launched in May of 2010, to carve out a really nice market without a lot of competition. But There's a lot of really interesting externalities that come along with.
Yeah, which is a perfect seg into what we're going to talk about today. So when we sat down before, you started telling me a little bit about the patent lawsuits you've been facing. So that is something that a lot of small business owners might think about at different points in their careers or in their journey of starting a company. And you have a really unique perspective on all this. So maybe give me a quick rundown of so how is it that you designed your prototype, and then how you had you called it a quote unquote storybook launch, and then what happened after that?
Sure thing. So it was a typical kind of ramp up. I was designing the first prototypes, in my bedroom after I'd quit my job in 2008, and we had thought that we were kind of wandering into a relatively niche market. We're going to sell a few dozen of these things a month, and it was just supposed to be this niche market product, and it was the first foray that I'd done into mass manufacturing.
Okay.
So this was pre-Kickstarter, so we did it the hard way. We raised money from friends and family to get the first manufacturing done, did all the supply chain stuff, got everything set up in China, and we didn't actually launch the product or do any sort of public announcement until we actually had inventory in-house.
How long was that process? From the moment that you first said we're going to make a docking station to the moment that you were ready to announce it to press, how long are we talking about?
That is a very good question. Like most starts, the idea goes back years and years and years before that.
Right.
And I slowly developed the capability and the desire to pursue something like that full time.
Yeah.
So I would say from late 2008 until probably May of 2010 was how long it took. And then really, really working in the manufacturing side.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah. And then really working with the manufacturers to ramp that up and get the tooling made and all of the little, it's really, every hardware product is about 98% of it's really easy. And the last 2%, it would take 98% of the time, right?
Wow, okay.
So that's what
extreme Pareto rule, extreme Pareto efficiency, the 80-20 rule to the max.
Right, exactly. And I thought going into this, there wasn't a lot of documentation for people doing really small hardware startups. Now it's very well documented thanks to Kickstarter. But during this time period, it was really kind of winging it. There were a handful of books out there, 1 or 2 blogs. Yeah. So I was under the impression that it was going to be a matter of weeks before we got the first.
Sure.
And then as we started researching it, and then I thought it was going to be months. And then it took 18 months, I think, total from end to end to get it going.
But, wow, 18 months old. And then if you add the time for the tooling and all that, you're looking at closer to over 2 years then.
No, it was just around 2 years, but I'm talking about once we engaged with the manufacturer and we started working through it and doing DFM, which is designed for manufacturing. Just like how does the plastic flow into the molds? Just little problems like that. And to really get a high quality finish that can match what Apple does was extremely challenging, even for a simple product like we had for the first ones.
Wow, it's wild. So there's a saying that amongst small business people and large business people too, actually, that everything takes twice as long and costs twice as much as you thought. But it seems like for hardware, it's like 4 times as long and 4 times as much.
Yeah, we use the figure 2.5 times as long.
2.5.
Yeah, and if you keep pushing the bounds, you're gonna keep running into those things. But bracing for those externalities that come along, and also making sure that you're innovating within that spectrum, so you have a graceful cascade when something doesn't necessarily work out. So if you're shooting for the moon, you want to be able to land somewhere, even if you don't hit that you've got backup plans for your backup
graceful
plans.
Cascade. That's an awesome name for when things go completely sideways and you're in a shit show. Hey guys, we're not in a shit show. We're in a graceful cascade. At the moment.
You know this as well as anybody else. You have to have running a business. You have to maintain that. It's not a false optimism, but you have to always be able to see a path forward, or it'll destroy you. Yeah,
there's always a move, right? Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so we get to the point there. You're ready. You have a product. You're ready to announce it. Then what happens?
So we've got all the units stacked up in our apartments, and my co-founder's wife was, of course, extremely upset about this.
Yeah.
But we put it up and put a press release out, made the website live. And we had like a trickle of orders come in, and then Engadget and I believe Gizmodo picked up the story back in the day, and immediately we were on Bluehost at the time because that was a thing. There wasn't cloud services really available to a small company.
That's right.
So it didn't take very long for the traffic they were pushing to knock out our payment processor, knocked out our web servers, and we ended up selling like what we thought was going to be 3 months of inventory in 3 days. It probably would have been faster. So
wow.
It was.
There was a Super Bowl commercial like that, I think, years ago.
I was going to bring it up. It's the IBM one, right?
IBM, right? When they're like, I'll get 1, 2, and they start celebrating.
And then everyone gets quiet, and they're like, oh no, that was what happened to us. But we had a little extra cherry on top of this whole launch.
Okay.
So in the space, there was one other company that was building docking solutions for MacBooks, and they were extremely expensive and not super capable, and they didn't really match the aesthetic. They were something that were very much designed in like the late 80s, it kind of seemed like.
Got it.
Well, what ended up happening was about 18 hours after we launched, we got hit with a cease and desist.
Wow. Can you explain, just for anybody who hasn't, I've gotten cease and desist, but for anybody who hasn't gotten one, what is a cease and desist?
It was a legal demand that we stop the sale of an advertising for sale of the products within 10 days that were
That's nice of them
supposedly infringing. Right.
Right.
And before this, though, there were two other founders that I worked with on this, and one was a lawyer. He was in law school during this time period. So we had already started filing a lot of IP for our own, intellectual property around various design elements and also utility elements. So, there's a couple different types of patents. Design patents aren't worth very much, but utility patents are what people are really looking for.
Explain to me just real quick the difference, because I'm actually not aware of that. So what is a design versus a utility patent?
There's nowadays there's a ton of different types of patents, but when you're thinking about patents in the classical sense, utility patents are typically what people are talking about. That's where a lot of the fighting you hear about takes place now. It would be something about how something functions, and there's certain criteria for an idea. It has to be non-obvious. It has to be unique. So sometimes you can combine different elements together, but there's, I think, millions of patents now out there. So it can be difficult to eke out a space, but just because you have a patent on whatever you're selling doesn't necessarily mean that somebody else can't come after you for their own IP. And we'll probably get into this a little bit later in the podcast about like some of the politics behind intellectual property. But as far as the story goes, we'll kind of come back to.
Yeah. So then you get the cease and desist.
Mm-hmm. And so ironically, we sort of adhered to the cease and desist because we sold out all of our inventory in 3 days. So, and we weren't going to be able to restock back in for another 3 months because that's how long it takes to do a production run in China.
Yeah.
Get the stuff on the boat and ship it over, and then pick it up and get it out to distribution.
How long does it take to ship? How long does a boat from China take?
Depending on the service you're running, probably 4 weeks, and it also depends on where you're sending it to, right? So if you have to go all the way around or through the U.S. To get to an East Coast warehouse, this is all logistics, and it's fascinating too. And then production runs, producing a physical good can take anywhere from days, depending on what you're making. If it's or some of the products that we make now with really high-end components in them, they have to be, you only source them from one place, so it can be up to 120-day lead time for individual components, which is, and when you have to pay cash out the door, that's an entirely different podcast. If you want to talk about cash flows.
That's cash flow, and actually there's another guest we're going to talk to about the cash management and logistics. But let's focus on your lawsuit and your what happened? What's next? So
we got hit with the cease and desist, and it was a bucket of cold water, to say the least.
I bet.
And 2 weeks before that, my co-founder had graduated with a specialty in intellectual property. So we were extremely lucky, but this was the point where we discovered why there weren't any major competitors in the space. So anybody else that had popped up got hit with a cease and desist and facing a potential lawsuit.
Yeah.
And just the costs involved in litigating something like that, even before you get to trial.
Yeah, discovery. Lawyers for this kind of stuff charge no less than $500 an hour.
Something like 90 or 95% of patent lawsuits never even make it to trial or never even make it past discovery because it's so expensive. That's why you see the patent troll industry is so strong, because it costs between $800,000 and $2 million a year to litigate on a patent, and your typical patent lawsuit will take up to 3 years to resolve. Wow! So it can be really gnarly. And then there's some dead periods in there too, where your competitors could be filing IP. It doesn't get published for 6 to 18 months. Yeah. So you can start a business in entirely clean space, and then all of a sudden find yourself on the other end of a patent gun, which is not a good place to be.
Sure.
So what ended up happening with us was the cease and desist happened. We actually ended up filing suit against them to basically preemptively have their IP invalidated with regards to our specific case. So they threatened us, and you can basically
threaten back.
We can threaten back. So we actually filed against them to try to. Basically, it was a posturing thing to try to scare them off, because my co-founder and our general counsel didn't think that their IP and their case had a lot of merits. They responded by individually naming. So they sued the business, and then they individually named 2 of the founders, myself and our general counsel, in their own thing. So they try to pierce the corporate veil, right?
Right, and they're trying to like basically say like, I'll see your response and raise you a personal.
Yeah. So this, even though it's not fairly standard, but it happens, and we knew that they were trying to scare us. It was still terrifying to be like, $25,000 potential per instance of infringement that we're like exposed to now, and that's for every unit that we've sold. Yeah. And at that point, it was a comical amount of money what that could come out to. Now, in reality,
fill this whole room with $100 bills.
Right. In reality, does that happen? Not really. Yeah. But it's still scary to be up against that, and you put the. It's hard enough to be starting.
And it's also, had you started a company before? Or was this your first?
I had some relatively smaller ones.
Okay. But this is the first time that it kind of got real like that.
Yeah, it was. This was definitely the gnarliest like thing that ever happened to us.
And you're a human being, so that kind of stuff hits you.
Yeah, and you see somebody who is protecting they're protecting the space by wielding this intellectual property, what they're totally allowed to do. Yeah. But instead of competing in the marketplace, they were defending the space using legal methods. And as a product designer and somebody who really is a big fan of innovation, that bothered me on like a very core level. I
understand.
So just getting my head wrapped around that, among all the other stresses of having a startup, was kind of a big deal. But what happened after that, I think, is where the real lessons are in the story during that summer. Yeah. So basically, before the patent, before the whole process really starts, and you go into a courtroom and you're doing all that, there's a period of ramp up and discovery where you kind of like the two companies are posturing back and forth. They usually have some opportunities to try to settle. So we were asking their counsel, kind of trying to get a range of like what they would find acceptable. Hey, do you want to buy us
to settle
this out? Because we'd really hit the market in a way that we were pretty sure that they never had.
Sure.
And the parent company, when we were looking at it, was supposedly, when we looked at their business profiles, was they were doing $20 million a year in revenue, and they were this part of this conglomerate. So they had some serious bucks, like
resources.
And that we, even having an equity holder that was a patent attorney, we didn't have access to that.
Yeah.
So it looked like if we couldn't form a deal with them, we weren't going to have the ability to be able to fight this through. And we'd made a decent amount of cash from the sales of those initial products, which we were immediately just, instead of spending on growing the business, we were buying inventory and doing all those things.
Putting in lawyers.
Yep. We were and even having one on all the filings, we had to bring in outside counsel and just to leverage all of this.
Right.
So that was very, very difficult. But the interesting thing that happened was and this is where the most valuable, there's a few lessons I learned out of this, but the most valuable lesson that I learned out of this was when we were talking to their general counsel or their IP lawyer who was working on prosecuting this, we would have these conversations about like, how do we get out of this? There's got to be a business solution for this. And, the business answer to, hey, would you like to buy us? And is, oh yeah, we'll buy you for $1. That's how we'll make this go away, right? But instead their answer was basically like, go to hell.
Really?
And yeah, that's a very strange thing to say. It's just disappear. I'm like, but we have a product that's doing something that your product's not. Like, the business answer is, yeah, we'll buy you for nothing, and that's where the negotiation starts. So we were getting stonewalled, which was very strange, and we weren't getting anywhere with that. And they wanted us to just disappear. So this went on. This started in about May. This went on to July, and we started bleeding through pretty much all the capital that we had raised. Mm-hmm. And we were ending up in a situation where our management team was so stressed out that my co-founder quit. And that was a really hard thing because we went way, way back and just kind of losing that faith. And he just couldn't see the risk reward payoff there. And
maybe he couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel either.
Right. And just like his exposure was huge in this potentially. And he just didn't think we could do it.
Sure.
So, and this is where the valuable part of the lesson comes in. I got to the end of my rope. I was terrified by these guys. And I was in business school at the time, and I'd taken a road trip around the country, and I happened to be staying with my girlfriend at the time in Central Illinois, now my wife. And I, out of desperation, just decided, you know what, I'm going to call their CEO. And this is probably something that if I hadn't been me, a lot of other people would have done it.
Yeah.
But I was terrified to do it, and I assumed that during the entire process that the messages had been getting through and that their counsel had been working in their interest and relaying these messages. And so I got on the phone with the guy, and immediately the conversation, I thought I was going to get torn a new one. And immediately I'm standing in the driveway shaking as I pick the phone up.
I'm shaking. I'm about to hear this. Okay, go ahead.
Like, who am I to be calling this CEO of this massive company?
Yeah.
And he was like pretty friendly, and he immediately started talking business. And this was really strange to me because we had tried to make these offers, and then all of a sudden, like, the lawyers' responses go to hell, and their CEO wants to play ball.
Yeah.
And looking back on it, what had happened was their lawyer had not been doing what he should have been doing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Probably serving his own self-interest, right? The lawyer
he was making a lot of money off of this.
Right.
And I was pretty shocked to find that out. But if I had we could have saved a lot of money and a lot of time if I just picked that phone up right away and gone to the source. And that was a really important lesson in trust but verify everything. And this happens over and over and over again in business.
Also, actually, how that's applied to my life. Like, sometimes just whenever things get confusing over email, just picking up the phone and calling that advisor, calling that investor, calling that employee, calling that person, that potential partner, and in 5 minutes on the phone can clear up, weeks and years of
getting through that middleman, because sometimes people think that they're communicating and they're not. It happens over and over and over.
You learn it at Small Business War Stories. Pick up the damn phone.
Just make the call. Worst case scenario, he would have cussed me out and hung it up.
Yeah.
And
you would have been
honestly, it wouldn't have been that bad.
In the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing. Right. And then at least I would have known.
Yeah.
So they happen to be located up in Chicago. So I drove up to Chicago.
You were in Dallas at the time.
No, I was in Central Illinois visiting my girlfriend.
That's right. Okay.
And I had been at a wedding. So
but you lived in Dallas.
I lived in Dallas.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I did the sort of what you're doing this summer. I did this massive road trip. Both
Soul of America tour coming up.
Mine was living out of a 350Z tour.
Oh wow!
Not quite as glamorous.
That is not a very roomy vehicle to live out of.
Surprisingly functional when that's the only thing you got.
Cool. So you make it to Chicago.
So we make it to Chicago, and then something really interesting happened. I was a Tuesday morning meeting at like 9 a.m.
Yeah.
And I'm wearing if you can imagine this, like I was in a wedding earlier that summer, and so I only had my suit with me. I didn't have any dress shoes because we had purple Converse that we wore. So I show up in a purple tie, purple Converse, and this suit, just looking like.
Well, that makes you look like a zany creative designer. So
like something
that might not
right?
be a bad thing.
So as I pull into the parking lot of this massive industrial park complex, like something struck me as being a little bit off. I looked around the parking lot, and it was, like I said, business hours on a Tuesday, and the parking lot was like 80% empty. And I was like, that's weird. Maybe they just got a parking lot. It's a big, brand new building. Everything.
Yeah.
We walk inside, and there's nobody at the receptionist desk, and the first 4 rows of cubicles are empty.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that I wasn't dealing with like a $50 million company or $20 million company, like some of the Dun & Bradstreet estimates said, that I was dealing with a much different entity. Somebody who was smaller, and this is something that they're probably trying to eke all of the momentum they can out of this product line, because they're having trouble keeping up with the new models that were being released and things like that. And there are other businesses I figured out probably were not doing as well as I'd anticipated.
Yeah.
So I started formulating a really half-ass plan. And
while in your purple chucks sitting in the lobby there.
Yeah, coming through trying to think of what's going on, taking all of this in.
Yeah. I need to get some purple chucks, by the way. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome. I still got them somewhere. Yeah. So we go and we sit down in the conference room, and it was like your typical scene. They have the CEO, some VP, 2 engineers, and 2 other random people. So I'm one person on the side of this table. What the hell am I doing here?
Yeah.
And they got their whole board. I can't even hardly see all of them in my peripheral vision.
Yeah.
And immediately the discussion starts, and their head of engineering just starts screaming at me across the table. And I don't know if they were trying to play good cop, bad cop at the time, but somehow I managed to hold my cool. I have kind of a bad temper, so I don't know why I didn't just go off. But
thank you for keeping you cool in the podcast.
I was able to hold it together. It's actually kind of funny to walk through this now, because I haven't I haven't told the full story in a really long time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they start working. I start trying to negotiate with the guy, and I'd put my MacBook on the table next to me, and it was tethered to my phone. I had a jailbroken iPhone at the time, and I had our pre-order system hooked up to my to our email because it was just real ghetto. Like I built the website and stuff, and I'm not a developer. Yeah. So every time a pre-order would come in, so we were accepting pre-orders for product, like email sign up, and every time a pre-order would come in, like my Mac mail program would make the mail incoming noise. Ding. Yeah. So it was sitting there for a while, and I'd opened it up a little bit earlier in the meeting to like show them our website and like walk them through what our designs were.
Sure.
And I'd left it open, and it was sitting there dinging. And finally, somebody goes, I think the CEO was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "Oh, sorry, that's the pre-orders." And he's like, "What?" And I was like, "Every time that dings, that's an order coming in." And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "How many pre-orders do you have?" And I pulled it up, and it was like 20,000 at that time. Yeah. And then the conversation changed, and he dismissed everybody else from the room. And that's when I realized I was like, we might actually be able to negotiate something out of this. So I was up against the wall, kind of facing either shutting the company down, but pretty much was my only option.
Did you do this on purpose? Because that sounds fucking brilliant.
No, that was an accident.
Okay, that's amazing.
I left it up.
What is that sound? Oh yeah, each one of those is a new customer.
So I pulled the laptop out for like to show the like a website or a schematic or something. Yeah. And it was sitting there making that noise, and I kind of I noticed it doing that, and I was going to close it or mute it. Yeah. When it was doing that, and I was like, about the same time they asked, I was like, I'm going to leave it and keep doing that. And so this was all just like winging it, right? Just adapting. I would have loved to have come up with a better plan beforehand, but I didn't never even consider that I'd walk out of this with a negotiated deal. And then I made a really kind of hilarious mistake. We started negotiating, and I was trying to like figure out where I could draw the line. And I told them, I was like, if we want to settle this, I was willing to give them a piece of the company. Yeah. And I was like, 1% over this number. So he did the old like write down a number thing. It was like 50%. You know, he like slid it across the table.
Really, like the Godfather style?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. It was a classic old school thing. And I don't mean to. I'm not talking crap about this guy. He actually turned into a fairly good partner, and I really enjoyed the time that I got to spend with him. Okay. And he went from like this demon in my life to like, oh, this is just a guy trying to do business as well in a period of like 30 minutes. So I was having this massive head check.
Of course.
So I needed to come up with a number that would satisfy everything. I was trying to do the math in my head, and I'm an art major. Yeah. So I'm not great at that. So I was trying to come up with an equity number, dividing like all the other percentages that we had outstanding that would leave me still with over 50% of the company. And I miscalculated in my head, and I gave them the 20% number as an exchange for basically being like, 1% over this, we're going to continue to pursue this, and 1% under this number, and we've got a deal. Yeah. And so I got a handshake deal on that across the table, and it wasn't until later when I ran the math that I was off by like 2% or something when I was crunching the numbers.
Your stomach sinks when you do that math.
Well, I still had my co-founders, so we had plenty of control over the company at that point too. But it was just kind of a funny little like carrying a number in my head screw up.
Wow, it happens.
So we got a handshake deal, and the rest of it went fairly smoothly through that. And then a couple of years later, when we raised our A round, we ended up we bought that section of the company back for them, and then resold it to our new investors for like 10x the value.
Okay, and you were able to, through that negotiated process, basically get rid of that patent, right?
Yep. So we were able to settle it out. The other part that happened here that kind of goes back to just understanding a little bit more about the oddities of the patent system was one option that we had. So the piece of IP that they had should have never been issued. It was the abstract on it was something like an electronic device by which an electronic computer or other electronic device is connected to a multiple of electronic connections. So basically,
like a power strip counts as that.
If you had a power strip where like everything was being plugged in, the 30-pin connector on an iPad or an iPhone, the old one, those technically met with that because it's a multiple of connections. It was just a really weird piece of IP that had been issued in like the late 80s, I think. Yeah. So the issue we had was that it was expiring in like 18 months after this was taking place. But we might as well, we can't wait 18 months, right?
18 months is too long.
So people were looking at it and like, probably your best course of action is to get the USPTO, U.S. Patent Authority, to invalidate this piece of IP. But they were really backed up at that time. They're still backed up now. It takes between 18 months and 3 years to get a piece of IP through.
Wow.
They had no interest in apparently looking at taking this on as like an invalidation because it was so close to expiration. Like, why are they going to spend time on that? Yeah. So that avenue was closed to us, which made things a little bit more complicated.
Wow.
Which was also a very good lesson too.
So what was the resolution of this forward? So basically, you ended up negotiating a deal that allowed you and your co-founders to keep control. One of the co-founders stayed with you, right?
Yes.
And the other one didn't.
He came back for a while, and then we parted ways a little bit after that.
Okay. Are you guys in good terms now? Sort of?
Yeah, probably.
Ish.
I mean, you know how these things kind of.
I have a co-founder. Actually, he was on the podcast. Joe and I discussed our breakup as co-founders, so I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Sometimes you just need a little bit of a cooling off period while there's still other things, but that's an entirely different set of stories. But I'm sure he wishes. I wish him the best, and he wishes me the best as well.
Cool, awesome. All right, so the big lessons are pick up the damn phone, and actually, there's another big lesson there, which is show up, right? Show up to was it Edison that said that? I'm gonna misquote this, but somebody that said that a big part of success is showing up. Mm-hmm. God, I wish I had the quote at the top.
Well, the parenting quote. So I'm a fairly new father. The parenting quote
congratulations.
is 80% of parenting is just showing up, and I always say people are like, isn't being a parent hard? Well, what other things in your life people say 80% of your job is just showing up? Nobody's ever said that about a job, but I get what you're saying. Where they say you're going to miss all of the opportunities that you don't show up
That's
for.
Wayne Gretzky.
Like that.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. There you go. Now we got a real quote.
There we go.
I feel 20% less dumb.
we got it full circle. And I think the last piece here in terms of how this has influenced. So this had a very big impact on our business and the way we structured it, because we had investors calling us up during this time period, and we had wandered into this like really open market. But when you're looking to raise money and you have a patent lawsuit and that phone hangs up really quick, so we had to cash flow the business, and that really was a very defining thing. But also in terms of our patent strategy, what we have tried to do, I think we have like 42 patents at this point now, and 28 or 30 of them are utility patents, which are the ones that are really useful.
Right.
Isn't so much to use our IP. I believe the business should be done in the marketplace, not in the courtroom.
But you have a lot of patents as a defensive measure now.
Exactly. And
so tell me, before we wrap up, tell me really quickly. So how does that? Tell me about your strategy and how you think about this defensive patent strategy that you kind of start going into. So
there are, as an innovator, you're looking toward the future and like where your products are going to go, and you're filing IP for things that are like 5 years out, right?
Yeah.
During that time period, other companies will build things. I mean, there's a couple of big players that are part of like larger groups that some of their products land on our IP. And even if we can't directly create sort of a standoff situation with somebody who is coming after us, some other competitor in the space or somebody else who just wants to make life hard for us, even if we can't directly say, all right, you've got one, I've got two.
Yeah.
We can always go to somebody else and say, hey, I'm going to mess with you if you don't mess with these guys, if they depend on their patent holding portfolio.
Wow.
So let's just say a company's got like 1,000. You can create sort of
so it's like a multi-party chess game.
Yeah, you can say, I'm going to mess with you guys if you don't send these guys a cease and desist.
Wow.
And I will, at the end of this, like sign a license saying that I'll never come, and this IP will never be used against you.
That is wild. So what percentage of your time is dedicated to this defensive IP strategy now?
Not very much.
But it's just enough that it's something that you have to do based on your experience.
It's not a significant activity in the business. Investors like to see a strong patent portfolio so that we're in a defensible space.
Okay.
We don't use it offensively yet, but we could. So they view that as a significant competitive advantage if it ever came down to it.
Will is one of my colleagues, and I yesterday were talking about exactly this. His mom has a company that makes knobs, like really fancy knobs for cabinets, and we're talking about the concept of offensive versus defensive patent. So this you currently use all of your patents defensively, but you could use them offensively if you felt like somebody. So actually, Tell me about that. So you were talking about competing in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. At what point do you see the break where you would use a patent offensively?
That's a really good question. We have not used any of our IP offensively or defensively. This is the end of that settlement was the last time that we ever got into one of those situations.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of opportunities where we could have done it, but again, it was just a massive distraction. I want to be where the focus is. So
sure.
I think right now I would say that I would rather continue to innovate and build better products than anybody else out there. And I welcome competition.
Yeah.
So I don't see a particular instance in which I would want to use that offensively.
I'll check with you in 5 years, see if you've gone on the dark side.
I have a board and I've got investors.
Yeah.
And who knows? I mean, if there was a strategic acquisition that ever happened, they may look at that as a potential option, but that's an entirely different course of action.
Sounds good. Well, where can people find your product? So if people wanted to go find your product, and if you have any other things that you want to share with our audience, what can they do?
Yeah, our products are available through Amazon and our website. It's hengedocks.com, like Stonehenge. We make a variety.
HENGE Docks, DOCKS.
Yep, and you can just type MacBook docking station into Google. We have a really unique partnership with Apple. So if you're looking for a discount on one of the new MacBooks and new connectivity options with USB Type-C and Thunderbolt 3, we've got all of that covered now, and like a lot of really new exciting products shipping out.
What do you mean? What's the discount? You want to share a discount with
listeners? We're the only hardware manufacturer for Macs that you can. Actually, we're one of the only places where you can get a discount on a MacBook at all. So if you go and you purchase one of our docking stations, you can also buy a MacBook bundled along with it, as well as some other pretty cool products like audio engine speakers and things like that. So we focus on creating these value-added bundles.
Which way do people have to buy that to get that discount? Through Amazon?
No, just straight through our website.
Through your website?
Yep, those are direct. So we sell through a number of different resellers as well, but that particular deal is a direct-to-consumer
so
or
in order to get the MacBook discount, you have to buy your Henge Docks station at your website.
Yep.
That makes a lot
of sense.
And
the MacBook. Yep. And we'll ship it. It'll come straight from Apple.
I thank you so much for coming to share your story today at Small Business War Stories. And I really hope that the rest of your South by Southwest trends upwards from your stolen badge experience. But I really appreciate you sitting down and taking the time.
Absolutely. I feel a lot better now. So this is a very cathartic way to move through it.
Love it. Matthew Vroom, founder of Henge Docks. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to Small Business War Stories. If you enjoy the show, share it with a friend, or you can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or on our blog at blog.proven.com. If you have an idea for us, we'd love to hear it. Please email us at podcast@proven.com. See you next time. Small Business War Stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes.